Tim Schafer is a man who I'm sure needs no introduction. I almost like to think of him as a less controversial David Cage, having creativity that has pushed the limits of the gaming industry just without the baggage and maliciousness. But he wasn't always riding this high horse, as his beginning was much humbler. This man's career began as a scumlet, which is essentially just someone who presents different ideas to the lead designer in order for it to be tested. But it also sounds like, well, scum. While it was a rather minor position, he made the most of it by meeting two of his closest friends, and, with their help, Schafer managed to climb the ladder and direct a couple of games on his own, one of these being the cult classic Grim Fandango, which earned multiple Game of the Year awards in the same time period when Ocarina of Time released. Eventually, Schafer made the next big leap and developed his own company, Double Fine Studios, and probably the game they have the most recognition for is Psychonauts, which conceptually was based off of a rejected idea Schafer had of the main protagonist entering another person's mind. Now, it's actually very surprising how well Psychonauts ended up, considering its turbulent development cycle. I mean, it almost looks fairly close to something like Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. There are a lot of issues finding a good office space, getting a publisher, and untangling the messy game code. Some of these problems almost single-handedly destroyed the company, so, really, it's a miracle that Psychonauts ended up not being a glitchy, unfinished mess. But of course, that was the case back in 2005. Evaluating it in 2025 is another story. Take this review from Giant Bomb. While the author states they enjoyed the game, they criticized the platforming, collectibles, and other aspects of the gameplay, and this was from 2021, which might indicate that there were some elements of Psychonauts that haven't stood the test of time. Is that enough to take this game out of cult classic status? We'll have to see and find out as I objectively look at Psychonauts and see if it's as good as it was back in the day. So, one of the greatest strengths Psychonauts has is how it presents its story. While it still utilizes some methods of traditional storytelling via cutscenes and exposition, it tries to also have the level designs the player traverses in supplement those elements. On the surface level, Psychonauts has a kind of simple plot. A boy named Raz stumbles upon Whispering Rock from a circus and desires to become a Psychonaut. While the camp counselors are initially suspicious of him and try to send him home, they realize later that there's something special about him. Eventually, trouble brews when each of the campers mysteriously get their brains stolen from them, and Raz has to find all of them, put it into whoever is doing this, and also get the girl at the end. Yeah, it's your typical save-the-world shenanigans, but the way Schafer tells the story reveals its narrative expertise. A lot of people praise the writing, and this game has some profound golden lines that are deep and funny.
You were born with a special gift, but the people around you treat it like a curse. Your mother is afraid of you, and your father looks at you with shame in his eyes. Come to Whispering Rock Psychic Summer Camp, and you can show them all. Back home, your powers make you a loner, an outcast, a circus freak. But in this dojo, in this psychic dojo, they make you a hero.
But their method of developing the characters is what always gets me. You see, each of the levels are based upon a person's brain, and progressing through them reveals more about the characters. Take someone like Mila. In order to match her bubbly personality, the entire level is based on a party going on in her head. It all looks like fun and games until you go off the beaten path and find a secret room with a box in the middle. Inside are several nightmares gated off, and while they all seemingly speak in gibberish, the player can barely make out them saying, "Mila, why did you leave us to die?" It really is quite creepy, and it just makes me want to get the hell out of here.
Help us, Mila. The party is upstairs. Lucky for you, I have my nightmares under...
With the stable minds, you have to go out of your way to find these subtleties. The mentally ill ones feel more obvious and, dare I say it, experimental. Lungfishopolis has Raz turn into a 100-foot Godzilla that stomps around while the puny civilians try to take him down. The lungfish in the real world is initially shown to be this hulking beast that kidnaps children. You would have thought it was a black and white villain, but no. Going into the lungfish's brain will reveal it was brainwashed and pumped with electrical charges to turn it into the monster it is now. If anything, with that background knowledge, the lungfish is more scared of you than you of it. So this doesn't just give us a level where we get to destroy shit and wreak havoc. It allows us to empathize for a beast we previously feared. Plus, her name is Linda, which means pretty and beautiful. Two definitions that definitely contrast with the more bestial nature she's associated with. Boyd's brain is supposed to be schizophrenic, so his mind has winding roads that have G-men patrolling the area. Since one of the symptoms of schizophrenia is paranoid delusions, Raz can't progress since he's constantly being watched. Therefore, he has to use special items to blend in without arousing suspicion. I'm surprised Black Velvetopia qualified as the fun level to Microsoft, because the Milkman Conspiracy has a lot of interesting elements unique from the rest of the game, including fixed camera angles that make me feel like I'm playing through a survival horror game, figuring out which items are necessary to get by, and so much more. But most of all, it's able to show schizophrenia accurately. Its winding and broken paths in a suburban neighborhood show a mind that isn't quite all together, and the nightmares roaming free give the vibes of a chaos and disorder that never knows true rest. Gloria's theater is supposed to be a reflection of bipolar disorder as represented by the different shades of light emitted on the stage. The scenarios that children act out are meant to be a retelling of the events of Gloria's life. Not only is this very creative, but there's also a certain charm to it. There's just something I find to be so innocent without a children reenact some rather dark and disturbing scenes that touch on themes like suicide and abandonment. And the way the plastic claw comes up to grab Raz when he falls into the water, or even how the actors exclaim in pain whenever they take a hit, all give a certain form of juvenile levity that lightens the mood of what is otherwise a serious subject matter. Fred Bonaparte's level is based off a board game, considering he became obsessed with one after losing so many times to one of his patients from the asylum named Crispin. The concept is executed pretty well, as it's very easy to go back and forth between large and small size. Just hit one of these champagne-looking air ducts, and voila! You're back to normal. Seriously, it surprises me how many people weren't able to figure this out. Looking at you, Scottish Duck 17. Other than that, there's not really much to say about this one. I guess one thing to mention is the way Raz communicates with Fred to bring him out of his dour mood kind of reminds me of talk therapy, which wouldn't be too out of place for a game about mental illness. Finally, Black Velvetopia explores Edgar's mind and his struggle with toxic obsession. The bull that charges around his mental landscape represents the anger he has towards his past. Can I just say that this is probably my favorite mind because of how relatable I find Edgar to be. He has trouble moving on from someone dear to him, and while my experience isn't as bad as his, I know what it's like having trouble letting go and moving on from a particular person. I won't go into too many details, but let's just say in college there was this chick.
We don't talk about that!
So, overall, all these levels have their own unique charm in how they're presented. By entering their minds, you get a feel for what they're like. And honestly, I wish there were more of them. Not being able to explore the camper's brains was kind of a missed opportunity. Whispering Rock feels like a living, breathing place, with the campers all having their own quirky personalities. And yes, I had to look up all their names because it was too much to remember. Don't sue me if I get any of them wrong. Nils is a real ladies' man that uses his clairvoyance to spy on the girls' dorm. Unfortunately, when it comes to actually talking to them, he's a total schmuck.
It'd be a real shame if you had to leave your butt here because it was anchored to my foot. Now beat it!
You just have to say that you're fine when you're not really.
Dogen is constantly paranoid and makes things explode. Elka has a lot of boy problems. It's kind of funny watching these two interact, as Elka is the type of girl that likes to unload all of her problems onto a person. But Dogen always be like... Chloe has a fascination of contacting extraterrestrial life, and Maloof is a target for bullying by Bobby and Benny until Mikhail comes to his rescue. All these dialogues are optional and can easily be missed if you just make a beeline to the end. While they don't really change the outcome of the game, they do add atmosphere and are fun Easter eggs. There are a lot of signposts and tree stumps with writing, and I recommend you read all of it, as they can have important lore on how the camp came about or character info.
200 years ago, native inhabitants began making arrowheads out of the Psychonauts, which they call by the name Whispering Rock. This is a rough English translation. 100 years ago, prospectors and settlers take over the area, naming their boomtown Shaky Claim. Goodbye, cruel camp. I'm tired of being picked on by Bobby and all the mean kids at camp. If I just had one friend here who was nice, then I would stay, but you're all mean and no one stands up for me, so I'm going home. I'll be in the parking lot waiting for my dad, so if you want to pick on me one last time, you'd better hurry. Maloof.
So the overall presentation and world building is the greatest strength of Psychonauts, but it has a couple of glaring issues, namely a certain Dr. Lobato. He's built up to be this big bad who steals all the campers' brains, and is even shown to be able to brainwash a lungfish. Well, he goes down like he's nothing. Like, there's not even a boss fight. Hell, the one who takes him out is Mr. Pokilo, a little turtle. That's emasculating. The other problem is Raz's backstory. He ran away from a dad who hated psychics, since they cursed his family to die in water because it's implied that he himself is one. Ah, the classic homophobe is secretly gay himself. This could have gone somewhere. Oh wait, turns out Raz was simply mistaken, and all along he just wanted the best for his son. I mean, it's heartwarming, but why did Raz perceive him as this abusive father figure in the beginning? Possibly I missed something, but I thought that could have been expanded upon. But those issues, relatively speaking, are bare bones and don't ruin the lovable characters and creativity. Relatively speaking, that is. Where Psychonauts kind of starts to get rough are the actual mechanics. The gameplay centers around Raz using different abilities to make it through the individual levels. He can use telekinesis, make himself invisible, utilize clairvoyance to see different perspectives, and fire psyblasts. These are all very fun to use, especially the clairvoyance, since some of these perspectives were very humorous, like how the cannon sees you as a leaf to be shot, or the G-Men see some kind of thief stealing stuff, representing Boyd's paranoid schizophrenia. However, the power-ups really wear out their welcome since they stop incentivizing you for upgrading your psi level. I mean, being able to become invincible at level 90 is really useful, but everything in between are upgrades to power-ups you already have. For instance, at level 50, you can make the levitation ball actually hurt enemies. Or at level 40, you can make your bullets ricochet off enemies. While maybe they are useful in a very minor way, they barely expand on your current moveset, which dampens the incentive and doesn't make you want to go out of your way to collect everything. Mind you, Psychonauts has multiple ways to level up, and I don't really want to take the time to explain it one at a time, so I'll just explain it all at once.
Shut the fuck up!
But despite all this variety, if the incentive isn't good enough, then I don't feel like engaging with it too much. I probably went to empty my cobweb duster once in the game because I really didn't feel the need to do it. If you're going to make me grind, make the reward at the end good. The same could be said about the arrowheads. Initially, the game makes it sound like collecting these is going to be a big part in the gameplay, but after getting the cobweb duster and a dowsing rod, you won't ever feel like returning to the camp store because the level designs never require you to buy the other stuff. I did buy a couple of dream fluffs, but I never touched the horseshoe magnet and the colorizer, mostly because I'm lame, but also because I forgot they were even there. There is one collectible that doesn't suffer from this problem, and that's the campers' brains. Not only do you get an extra sliver of health every time you get one, but after you return to Agent Crawler and insert it back in, you'll be treated to a funny little interaction with the camper you just saved. A few of them want to help your cause, but most of them just fuck off and mind their own business. Like, your brain has just been stolen, and so many of them walk it off like nothing happened. But anyway, you'll be needing a lot of the extra health they give you for the final level, Meat Circus. Look, I really appreciate this level from a storytelling perspective. I like Raz's reconciliation with his dad. I like how they made Oleander a more sympathetic character. But this level's platforming can be unforgiving. The funny thing is, this is the only time where it presents some form of danger. I don't know if it was just me, but there weren't many bottomless pits except for a few sections, And even in these areas, the platforming is relatively simple. There are a lot of bodies of water that swallow Raz whole, but these don't really cost a life. A lot of people complain about the jumping being unwieldy, but I never had much of a problem with the controls. Well, maybe it got really annoying with Longfishopolis, because everything drags with Raz's size. But thankfully, that's only one level. Grinding on rails felt somewhat awkward because it was always kind of sluggish. But again, since there weren't many parts where rail grinding was remotely challenging, this feels like a minor issue. A bigger problem is trying to find all the mental figments. Word of advice, don't try too hard to 100% Psychonauts. You'll struggle finding all those figments because some of them either move around or they'll be so opaque that you'll basically move past them. How could they have fixed this? Well, look no further than Spyro the Dragon. In each of the levels, there was always a small glimmer in the distance that let you know there were gems in a far-off place. It was a hint that didn't feel like it was holding your hand too much. Psychonauts, on the other hand, doesn't really give you anything to go by. Why not have a gadget in the camp store that made it easier to find the figments instead of a horseshoe magnet? Honestly, something like that would have decreased the frustration by a lot. I'm not saying I don't like difficulty, but this was unnecessarily hard to the point that I had to look up a walkthrough to find all of them. Speaking of which, the map is completely useless most of the time. You know, Lily, you're all sweet and stuff, but don't be such a bitch when it comes to not using the map, because for most of these levels, I couldn't access it. I understand that Double Fine wants the player to figure out the levels for themselves, otherwise it'd ruin the sense of exploration for each mind. But why have this feature at all then? It's almost as if they didn't think it all the way through about how they were going to implement it, and they sort of left it half-baked. But does any of this ruin Psychonauts as a game? Of course not. While it may have sounded like I was eviscerating it, the excellent presentation and characterization gives it a charm no other game has. In fact, let me give you a bit of insight regarding what this game means to me. A lot of the time, I work a boring 9 to 5, and most of the days I come home wondering how long I have to go through this cycle, not too dissimilar to Fred Bonaparte. Well, playing through Psychonauts and experiencing the characters and watching them overcome their issues is strangely therapeutic for me. Raz guiding Fred to victory makes me think that I can win, even though it feels like my channel is dead. Edgar moving on from Lampina makes me think that as much as I like to think my life would be better being with my former crush, maybe it wouldn't, and it's more beneficial to just move on. Psychonauts feels very human, for lack of a better word, and that aspect just kept me playing. It really is a shame it didn't do as well as it could have. The fiscal projections from Majesco Entertainment went from a net gain of $18 million to a net loss of $18 million after this game's release. This resulted in CEO Karl Jankowski to step down. Here's the catch, though. Since their contract with Majesco expired, Double Fine was able to work more independently. With this, they were able to launch the game on more digital storefronts, like Steam, and suddenly the game took off, selling about 1.7 million copies. Honestly, maybe not the most successful of titles, but still good enough that they got to work on a sequel, Psychonauts 2, which released in 2021 to similar critical acclaim and was also able to get 1.7 million in a shorter time period, which would make it Double Fine's best-selling game. Considering that the game left the dev team burned out and there hasn't been any news of a Psychonauts 3, we probably won't see this IP come back anytime soon. Honestly, I haven't played Psychonauts 2, so I have no idea if they left it open or finished it with a satisfying conclusion. But all in all, Psychonauts is a game worthy of the title of being cult classic. Even though it's rough around the edges with some of its dated mechanics, it still manages to impress in more ways than one. Well, with not much else to say, I'm Dave Reviews, and I'll see you guys later.